winter of 2012, archaeologists excavating a ritual complex at Chaco Canyon in New Mexico made a discovery that would take 5 years to fully understand. Beneath the floor of what appeared to be a ceremonial kiva, circular subterranean chamber, they found an older structure, sealed, intact, undisturbed for nearly 900 years. When they carefully removed the capstone and lowered cameras into the darkness, they found 14 people, arranged in 2 concentric circles around a central fire pit. The pit was filled with ash, completely filled, as if the fire had burned until there was nothing left to burn. And surrounding the pit, carved into the stone floor in a continuous spiral pattern, were hundreds of identical symbols. Handprints. Not painted, carved, deep enough to leave permanent marks. But here's what made the excavation team call in specialists from 3 different universities. The skeletons showed evidence of repetitive stress injuries, specific injuries, localized to the jaw, the hyoid bone, and the intercostal muscles. The kind of injuries that come from prolonged, sustained vocalization. The 14 people hadn't just sat around that fire. They had sung for hours, possibly days, until the wood ran out, until the flames died, until their voices stopped. This is the story of 14 people who sang in the darkness until there was nothing left but silence and ash. 900 years ago, Chaco Canyon was the center of one of the most sophisticated pre-Columbian cultures in North America. The ancestral Puebloan people previously called Anasazi built massive stone structures aligned with solar and lunar cycles. They created a network of roads connecting outlying communities across 75,000 square miles. They transported timber from forests 60 miles away to construct ceremonial buildings. And they built kivas. These weren't simple shelters. Kivas were sacred spaces, subterranean chambers used for ritual, ceremony, and spiritual practice. Most were circular, ranging from 3 to 20 meters in diameter. They contained fire pits, ventilation shafts, and sipapu, small holes in the floor representing the emergence point from previous worlds. Ancestral Puebloan cosmology understood existence as a series of worlds, each destroyed and abandoned before emergence into the next. The current world, the fourth world in most traditions, was reached by climbing through darkness into light. Kivas were thresholds, places where the boundary between worlds became thin. Most kivas show evidence of repeated use over decades or centuries, layers of ash from countless fires, tool marks from maintenance and repair, soot on ceilings from generations of ceremony. But the sealed chamber beneath the ceremonial kiva designated Structure 47 by the research team was different. It had been used once, and then sealed forever. Dr. Ruth Galindo, lead archaeologist for the Chaco Research Archive, directed the excavation. Her initial field assessment noted the chamber's unusual preservation. No secondary deposits, no rodent disturbance, no evidence of looting or later access. Whatever happened in that chamber had remained untouched since the day it was sealed. Her preliminary report included this line: "The evidence suggests a single terminal event." The excavation of Structure 47 took 18 months. The site was extraordinarily delicate. The sealed environment had created unique preservation conditions. What Dr. Galindo's team uncovered was systematic, ritualized, and increasingly haunting. First, the architecture. The chamber was perfectly circular, approximately 4 meters in diameter. The walls were lined with shaped sandstone blocks fitted without mortar, classic ancestral Puebloan masonry. The ceiling was intact, a corbelled dome constructed from progressively smaller stone rings, and it had been sealed from above. Heavy sandstone slabs had been placed across the top of the dome, then covered with packed earth and clay. Someone had closed the chamber permanently after the 14 people were inside. Second, the arrangement. The 14 individuals were positioned in 2 circles, 7 in the outer ring, 7 in the inner ring, all facing the central fire pit. They weren't sitting casually. They were kneeling, knees on the floor, back straight, hands resting on thighs. A formal position, a ceremonial position, and they had maintained it until death. Third, the fire pit. The central hearth was approximately 1 meter in diameter, lined with fire-cracked stones. Chemical analysis of the ash revealed it was primarily piñon and juniper wood species that would have required deliberate collection from the surrounding mesas. But here's what made the fire pit extraordinary. The ash layer was nearly 40 centimeters deep. Dr. Galindo brought in Dr. Marcus Webb, a specialist in archaeobotany and ancient fuel use. His analysis estimated that the volume of ash represented approximately 12 to 16 hours of continuous burning. The fire had been massive, deliberately sustained, fed constantly, and then it had been allowed to burn out completely. No one had removed the embers. No one had cleared the pit. The ash had simply accumulated until the fuel was exhausted. Fourth, the skeletal evidence. Osteological analysis revealed the 14 individuals ranged from approximately 15 years old to 60. There were men and women, no children, no infants. Isotope signatures showed they had lived in the Chaco region for most of their lives. Dental patterns suggested shared dietary practices, high in maize, supplemented with hunted game and wild plants. They were healthy. No signs of disease, no evidence of malnutrition, no skeletal markers of chronic illness. And then Dr. Sarah Okonkwo, a bioarchaeologist specializing in skeletal stress markers, noticed something unusual. Multiple individuals showed hypertrophy, abnormal bone growth on the mandible and temporal bones, the areas where jaw muscles attach, the kind of hypertrophy that develops from repetitive, sustained jaw movement over extended periods. Over the next year, Dr. Galindo's team conducted microscopic analysis of skeletal remains and chamber deposits. What they discovered transformed the interpretation of the entire site. Dr. Okonkwo's detailed examination revealed additional skeletal anomalies. The hyoid bone, a small horseshoe-shaped bone in the throat that anchors the tongue, and larynx showed unusual ossification patterns in 6 of the 14 individuals. This wasn't pathological, it was adaptive. The kind of bone remodeling that occurs in response to chronic muscular stress. The kind seen in professional singers, chanters, and ritual vocalists. Dr. Okonkwo consulted with Dr. Hiroshi Tanaka, a specialist in biomechanical stress analysis. After reviewing CT scans of the skeletal remains, he confirmed the individuals had engaged in prolonged, intensive vocalization. Not casual speech, not occasional singing. Sustained, forceful vocal projection over extended periods. But the most revealing evidence came from the ribs. Microscopic analysis showed patterns of microfracturing and remodeling in the intercostal spaces, the areas between ribs where breathing muscles attach. Dr. Tanaka's report was precise. The pattern is consistent with sustained, controlled deep breathing, the kind required for extended vocal performance or ritual chanting. The 14 people had been using specialized breathing techniques, deliberately controlling their respiration to sustain vocalization for hours. And then came the discovery of the handprints. Dr. Galindo had initially documented the carved symbols as simple decorative elements, but when digital imaging specialist Dr. Lin Chen created high-resolution 3D maps of the floor, a pattern emerged. The handprints weren't random. They were arranged in a continuous spiral, starting from the outer wall and moving inward toward the fire pit. 468 handprints in total, each approximately 5 to 8 centimeters deep, carved into solid sandstone. Dr. Chen analyzed the tool marks. The handprints had been carved with stone implements likely chert or obsidian. Each would have required significant time and effort to create. And here's what made them extraordinary. Petrographic analysis of the carved surfaces revealed microscopic traces of organic material in the grooves. Blood. Human blood. Not splattered, not accidental, deliberately placed into the carved depressions. Someone had carved each handprint, then filled it with blood before the blood dried. Dr. Galindo brought in Dr. Rebecca Foster, a specialist in ancestral Pueblo and ritual practice. Dr. Foster noted that handprints appear throughout southwestern rock art, often associated with emergence narratives, transformation rituals, and boundary marking. But carved handprints filled with blood were unprecedented. The spiral pattern suggested progression, movement, a path leading from the outer world toward the center, toward the fire. And when Dr. Chen overlaid the handprint map with the skeletal positions, something became clear. Each person in the outer circle was positioned directly over a section of the spiral. Their knees rested on carved handprints. They had been kneeling on the symbols while they sang. In 2016, Dr. Galindo authorized chemical analysis of residues found on the interior walls of the chamber. The stone surfaces near the ceiling showed unusual deposits, carbonized organic material, mixed with lipids and protein compounds. Not from the fire, the distribution was wrong, the chemical signature was different. Dr. Webb analyzed the residues using gas chromatography and mass spectrometry. His conclusion was unexpected. The deposits were consistent with aerosolized respiratory secretions, moisture from breathing, expelled during forceful vocalization. Over hours of sustained singing in an enclosed space, the condensation from 14 people's breath had accumulated on the walls and ceiling. The chamber had become saturated with their voices. And then Dr. Webb made a final discovery. Analysis of the ash in the fire pit revealed something that didn't belong: microscopic fragments of human tissue. Not bone, not teeth, soft tissue. Specifically epithelial cells from the throat and larynx, the kind of cells that tear away during extreme vocal strain. The 14 people had sung so intensely for so long that they had damaged their own vocal cords. Tissue had torn, cells had sloughed off, and the fragments had fallen into the fire below. They had sung until their throats bled, and then they had kept singing. The fire had burned for 12 to 16 hours. The 14 people had knelt in 2 circles, breathing in smoke, projecting their voices toward the flames. They had carved handprints into stone and filled them with blood. They had positioned themselves over those symbols, and they had sung. Until the wood was consumed, until the flames died, until there was nothing left but ash and smoke and darkness. And then, when the fire went out, they had stayed kneeling, in the dark, in the silence, until they died. Since the excavation, researchers have proposed multiple theories to explain why 14 people would seal themselves in a kiva and sing until a fire burned out. None provide a definitive answer, but together, they reveal the complexity of ancestral Pueblo and spiritual practice. Some anthropologists believe the group was performing an emergence ritual, a symbolic reenactment of the journey from the third world to the fourth world. In Puebloan cosmology, emergence required passage through darkness, purification by fire, and transformation through sound. The singing would represent the voices calling upward, seeking the opening to the next world. The fire would serve as the destructive force that allows transformation. The handprints carved in spirals would mark the path of ascent. By singing until the fire consumed itself, the group may have believed they were completing a cosmic transition, dying in one world to emerge in another. This theory explains the ritualized positioning, the emphasis on vocalization, the symbolic handprint spiral, the deliberate fire management, and the choice of a sealed kiva as a threshold space. It accounts for the selection of specific individuals, no children, suggesting chosen participants rather than families in crisis. But it fails to explain why the emergence would require death. In traditional Puebloan emergence narratives, the people survive the journey. They climb through the sipapu into light and air. Why would this version end in asphyxiation and starvation in a sealed chamber? And if this was meant to be symbolic, at what point did it become literal? When did the metaphor of singing until transformation become the reality of singing until death? A more pragmatic interpretation suggests the group was responding to an environmental or social crisis, perhaps prolonged drought, crop failure, or conflict with neighboring communities. The ritual may have been intended as a supreme offering, voices and lives given to ensure the survival of the larger community. The fire represents consumption and sacrifice. The singing represents the transfer of life force through sound. The sealing of the chamber ensures the offering cannot be reclaimed or interrupted. By singing until the fire died, they were demonstrating absolute commitment. This theory explains the formality of the arrangement, the investment in symbolic preparation with carved handprints and blood, the selection of healthy adults rather than the sick or weak, and the choice of a kiva associated with cosmic communication. It accounts for the apparent voluntarism. These were chosen representatives, not desperate refugees. But archaeological evidence from the period shows no signs of crisis. Tree ring data indicates adequate rainfall. Midden analysis reveals diverse diet and successful agriculture. And if this was a community offering, why seal the chamber? Why prevent witnesses? Why ensure that what happened inside could never be verified or validated by those outside? A darker theory proposes this was a form of spiritual endurance test, a challenge to maintain discipline, faith, and vocalization despite physical suffering. The goal may not have been to survive, but to prove worthiness through suffering. The fire would create heat, smoke, and oxygen depletion, increasing physical stress. The singing would require controlled breathing despite deteriorating air quality. The kneeling position would cause pain over hours. The test: continue singing until the fire dies regardless of cost. Those who maintained discipline would achieve spiritual elevation even if their bodies failed. This theory explains the extreme physical evidence: damaged vocal cords, stressed skeletal systems, prolonged maintenance of uncomfortable positions. It accounts for why no one apparently tried to leave or break formation. It explains why the fire was allowed to burn out naturally, rather than being extinguished. The fire's death was the end point, not an arbitrary decision. But it cannot explain how collective discipline held across 14 people for 12 to 16 hours. Why did no one break? Why did no one succumb to survival instinct when breathing became difficult? And most troubling, the youngest participant was approximately 15 years old. What belief system convinces an adolescent to kneel in smoke and darkness, singing until their throat bleeds, until oxygen fails, until death? The most speculative theory suggests this was an intentional sacrifice of sound itself, a belief that voices, properly offered, could accomplish what physical objects could not. Perhaps they believed they were singing the world into continued existence, or singing away a threat, or singing open a passage that had closed. The spiral of handprints could represent the path their voices were meant to travel from the physical world inward, toward a spiritual center. The blood in the carvings could activate the path. The sustained vocalization could serve as the vehicle, and the fire could be the transformative force that allows sound to cross between realms. This theory explains the obsessive focus on vocalization, the damaged throats, the breathing stress, the hours of sustained singing. It accounts for the symbolic architecture handprints as markers, spiral as path, fire as transformer. It explains why the chamber was sealed to ensure the sound remained contained, directed, focused toward its intended purpose. But it offers no parallel in known ancestral Puebloan practice, and it fails to address the fundamental question. If the goal was to send voices somewhere, why did the singers themselves have to die? Why couldn't they stop singing when the fire burned out? Why remain kneeling in darkness until death? Here's what we know for certain. 900 years ago, 14 people descended into a kiva at Chaco Canyon. They were healthy. They were chosen. They were adults and near adults who understood what they were doing. They carved 468 handprints into the stone floor in a continuous spiral pattern. They filled those carvings with their own blood. They positioned themselves in 2 circles around a massive fire. They knelt on the symbols they had made. And they sang. For 12 to 16 hours, they maintained vocalization. They controlled their breathing despite smoke and heat. They projected their voices toward the flames. They sang so hard their throats bled. They sang so long their bones began to reshape. And when the fire consumed the last of the wood, when the flames died and the chamber filled with darkness and smoke and carbon dioxide, they kept their positions. They stayed kneeling on the spiral of handprints, in silence now, in darkness, until their bodies failed, until there was nothing left but bones in formation and 40 centimeters of ash. We don't know what they believed their voices would accomplish. We don't know if they were calling something, sending something, transforming something, but we know they believed it was worth everything. Every carved symbol, every hour of singing, every breath in failing air. This wasn't desperation, this wasn't accident. This was devotion. And whatever they thought would happen when their voices finally stopped, whatever they believed their singing would achieve, it was powerful enough to convince 14 people to kneel in the dark and sing until there was nothing left but ash and silence. The kiva is sealed again now, protected, preserved. But the spiral of handprints remains beneath the earth. 468 symbols carved in stone and filled with blood, still marking a path we cannot follow, and 14 people whose songs we will never hear are still there, kneeling in the dark, in silence now, after singing themselves into whatever comes after the fire burns out. If this story affected you, you're not alone. Structure. 47 remains one of the most profound discoveries in ancestral Puebloan archaeology, and it raises a question that may never be answered. What could 14 people have believed their voices would accomplish that was worth singing until they died? If you want to explore more mysteries like this, acts of faith we can witness but never fully comprehend, rituals we can excavate but not decode, stay with us. Every week, we descend into the spaces where devotion becomes its own answer. Leave a comment with your thoughts. What do you think they were singing for? And if this story moved you, share it. These voices deserve to be remembered. Every spiral holds a story. This one holds 14 people who sang until there was nothing left but silence. See you in the next descent.